Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. I am Blake Rasmussen, your only host this week, but that doesn't matter because you're not here to see me. You're here to hear from the one and only Seb McKinnon, who is joining us live via satellite to talk about art and all things magic art, everything he's done, his inspirations, that whole thing. So welcome, Seb, to the show.
Hi.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm good, and you?
Good. I'm wonderful. So we're going to be asking Seb a lot of questions, but put your questions for Seb in the chat, and we'll see if we can get to them by the end of the show. We have a lot to talk about because, Seb, you've got a ton of awesome art out, especially lately. We want to talk about individual pieces. We want to talk about upcoming stuff, but let's start with, how did you get started with magic generally?
Well, I got into magic as a kid. I think I must have been like around 9 years old, and my parents bought us, my brothers and I grew up with 4 brothers, and I'm the eldest, one of them, my parents got us these booster pack of classic 6th edition, I think it was.
Okay.
And we were just blown away by, I don't know, by the artwork and everything, and we didn't really know how to play the game. It seemed too complicated at the time, and so we just had all our own binders with cards with the artwork that we liked. And that's what we did. We just looked at them. But then after a while, it was only years later that we actually figured out how to play. And then that was a lot of fun too, doing that. So that was my first kind of intro to magic.
Okay. There aren't a lot of 9-year-olds out there admiring art. When did you first start drawing, painting, doing art, whatever you did as a kid?
Yeah, well, it's my mom. My mom was for a time a graphic designer, and
Okay.
I remember as a kid being very young and just watching her draw. And I think that was probably the moment when I felt like, I don't know, something inside, when I just watch her draw these things, and I just felt like, oh wow, I have to do that too. And so since I was a kid, I would have I had my sketchbook, I had my pencils, and we'd go and I just draw as much as I could all the time. So when I saw these cards, I was just really drawn to the artwork and tried to copy some of them as well. We tried to copy the art on the cards. Yeah.
Okay. Did any of your brothers end up becoming artists as well?
Yes. Well, they all have their own skill. One of them is very good at writing. He's a poet. He's a writer. One of them is a 3D, really great 3D artist who just graduated a few months ago from college here. And yeah, so no, everyone is really, we all enjoy art, and we're all kind of, working. My dream is to one day with all of them work together on films, and yeah, that's the dream.
Yeah, that'd be very cool.
Yeah.
When did you get started doing art for magic?
That was, oh God, I forget the year. Well, it was M13 was the first set that I contributed to. And at the time when I got, I got an email from Jeremy Jarvis. And I was working at Ubisoft at the time, and on the Rainbow Six franchise as a concept artist. And I remember, I think while I was still in school, sending out my portfolio to the Wizards art drop. And I didn't really expect to hear back. And then just out of the blue, this email from Jeremy Jarvis saying, hey, would you be interested in doing some art for magic? And it was like the best news in the world. It felt very surreal, to finally be able, that this opportunity was given. And it was for M13, and my first card was Attendant Knight. Yeah. And it was a huge pressure to do a good job on that one. And yeah, so that was my first piece for Magic. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Jeremy Jarvis for giving me a shot, because it really did change the course of my life.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
So M13 was your first set. Do you have a favorite set you've worked on?
Yes, I love the Innistrad setting a lot.
Okay.
And it's funny, did the Ted the Ninth piece. I think, if I'm not mistaken, around that time, or maybe a month before, the first Innistrad set came out, and I felt so. I was so disappointed because I felt like, oh, I just got in, but then I missed the best set ever. So I didn't think we'd go back. But then when eventually when we went back there, I was really excited, and I just love the gothic vibe and the darkness that it offers. Yeah, yeah. So Innistrad I like a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, at least that I contributed to. But then my out of all the sets and settings, Lorwyn for me is I love a lot, and I love everything about the, folklore that surrounds fairies and all this kind of stuff. Really into that kind of stuff, and that whole set really stood out to me, and so I think out of all the sets, that's probably my favorite one.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed Lorwyn. The art's very different, and it really sets it apart. So, now what's your background? What's your training?
I studied illustration and design at Dawson College in Montreal, and that's like a 3-year technical program. In Quebec, there's a system called CEGEP, and it's like pre-university, but you can do technical programs to get you ready for the industry right away, and that's where I got a lot of my training.
Okay, are you Canadian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't know that. My wife is Canadian too.
Do I sound Canadian? People tell
me
you
don't. You really don't. That's why it kind of surprised me. Yeah, my wife and my wife's mom are Canadian, and there's just most of the time she sounds perfectly normal. She's lived here for a while, but then there are certain words like process that you hear every once in a while that you're like, oh yeah, Canadian. Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the French does come out. Like I catch myself saying things like development for development in French, développement, and it's just like, yeah, it's anyway.
Okay. We can talk about Canada later.
Yeah.
Speaking of process, what is your process for creating these pieces for Magic?
It's a really it's hard to describe, but I guess, okay, well, to go back, like when I was introduced to digital painting, when I was studying, at first I was really skeptical about digital painting. I didn't really want to do, when they were teaching us that, I thought I just want to stick to my watercolors and not touch this. I don't like it. But then after, looking into it and seeing what other artists were doing, especially artists like Craig Mullins, like I remember seeing these process videos where he kind of takes one of his watercolors and then scans it and then brings it into Photoshop and then starts painting on top of it, but messing up the canvas into this kind of really abstract thing. And that video process kind of blew my mind, and it kind of opened my eyes to the possibility of digital media. So that's how I approach usually my commissions. It's that way. I start with by messing up the canvas into this chaotic mess of colors and textures, and just making it. I'm looking for something in the chaos, and then eventually something does emerge. Very similar to looking at clouds and seeing shapes in the clouds, and then once the subject reveals itself to me, then I go on with that, and then I bring it to the final. So that's what I usually do.
Okay, it's really interesting you describe it that way, because a lot of what Magic Art starts with is actually an art description, and they say draw us this or something like this. But one of our art directors, Cynthia, said that you often come up with ideas that are totally different than the art description, and they've made it through. And you said you've done some back and forth. So How often would you say you get alternate ideas that you try to go a different direction from the art description?
Mm, I mean, it's not super often, but usually I try. It only happens when I really feel something. Like I said, like when something emerges from that chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and like while you're doing it, it's like you can kind of do it, but in a half conscious state. So you kind of know where you're supposed to head.
Mm-hmm.
You know you have to bring this art description to life, but there are countless possibilities or different ways to do it. So every now and then, something will emerge from the chaos that doesn't fit the art description, but that I have a really strong emotional connection to, and those are the ones that I usually try to push and suggest. I always, it's they're proposals. Like in the end, I really just want to do what the art directors want me to do, and I just want to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really happy. I'm really happy when these alternate ideas actually do get accepted and go through. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any examples of any alternate descriptions that went through?
Yeah. Well, since Cynthia asked the question, I think, yeah, Force of Despair was
Okay.
one to speak about, like a most recent artwork.
Mm-hmm.
I could actually pull up the art description for that if you want.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So what Cynthia suggested was, I mean, to be fair, like they were open to an abstract idea,
Mm-hmm.
but what the art description said was, okay, show a human that looks surprised as a hand clamps down on their shoulder from behind and pulls them backwards, and it's the hand of a zombie corpse. But on that zombie shoulder is the hand of a more rotted zombie,
Mm-hmm.
and then a more rotted down to a skeletal hand. Perhaps they're tumbling together into an open grave. So, great idea as well. But then when I was, again, like working in this chaos, this idea with having the three figures with the knight turning into the skeleton, turning to like the flesh, and then the skeleton just kind of popped up, and then suggested it to Cynthia. And I think I had to like pitch it even more because I think she was unsure at the beginning if it was going to work or not. But in the end, when I gave the final and she allowed me to go with it, she said it was, that she was happy that we went with that concept. So everyone was happy, and it's one of my favorite pieces I've done. Most recent pieces. I really enjoyed that one. I remember I was in the zone, and I spent I didn't really get up from my computer for a good like 2 days, and I just kind of went into it.
Yeah. So I think we've actually got the one of the sketches you submitted for this. We'll pull that up. So this is the sketch. This is the one you posted on Twitter. At what point in the process did you submit this to Cynthia?
That was, when there's a sketch due date, so I just sent that on the due date.
Okay.
And from there, if I recall correctly, I think she wrote back and she said there was something about the direction. She wasn't sure if the idea was going to sell because of the direction of the way they were facing or something.
Mm-hmm.
But then after like working it through with her, then it just it went through. So I was happy about that.
So so once you submit this sketch, what's the process from there? Getting from this to the final piece?
Then it's just a matter of, well, see, that one, that's a pretty, for me anyway, that's a pretty far advanced sketch. Usually when I send sketches, some of them are more rougher and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because I was feeling such a strong emotional connection to that piece. So I tried to make the sketch extra nice and for Cynthia, so to make sure it was going to go through. So after that, it wasn't too bad, too much of a, it's just you go in and you render, and then you like the sketch, if I recall correctly, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's more like desaturated colors. So you boost the saturation, you go in, it's just about, zooming in and doing details, which for me is always, it's I think, to be honest, like my least favorite part is the rendering.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I still enjoy it and it's still fun, but I really like more the coming up with the idea part,
The active creation rather than finishing it off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and leaving things like unfinished sometimes, or more loose, or more, yeah.
And I think we were talking before the show. I think you said you had one other example of a card that went a different direction than the art description.
Yes, that we were talking about Vengeful Rebirth.
Yeah.
And that one was one again where the mood was very. I knew what they like. It's funny because I kind of knew what they were going for, but the art description, which was also very good, for some reason I was having a harder time with it. To bring it to life and create a sketch that was I personally would be really happy with. That one called for like at first it was supposed to be like a statue, I believe, that was like the head of a statue that was half crumbling into vines with one eye in flame, something like that. And but then again, working through this kind of chaotic mess, this kind of cyclical death, rebirth kind of thing came through. And at the time, I was really, really inspired by Klimt as well. I was looking at a lot of Klimt paintings, and so I think that's pretty obvious, like the inspiration behind that one. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's talk through some of your more recent art, and we'll start with someone in chat was just talking about Deliver Unto Evil. They bought your playmat. And so I'm sure that they want to hear a little bit about how you landed on this finished piece.
Yeah. Well, thank you for buying the playmat, whoever you are. It's really much appreciated. That one was it was actually asked for. The style. Yeah, they asked for kind of like I think if I remember correctly, like it was going to be a big story moment in the War of the Spark, and so I remember submitting 2 ideas. I think Don Murin was the art director on that one, and I submitted 2 ideas. One that was going to be more painterly and darker, and it was kind of a Nicole Bolas over the city, and then the other one was this kind of, again, like kind of profile view, and they went with that one. And I just really wanted to make it, like feel like a storybook kind of illustration, something that maybe the next generations on Ravnica would talk about it, and it be in one of their tomes or something like that. Yeah. So that's, I don't know if that answers the question, but
okay. Yeah, absolutely. So now you mentioned we mentioned just now that they bought your playmats. Now you started a Kickstarter recently for your Magic illustrations on playmats. Does that cover your entire catalog? Is it just select pieces? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's just select. So the one that just wrapped up, that closed recently, was the second Kickstarter campaign. But I did a last year first one, and it's my most, I guess, popular pieces.
Okay.
That people like. But then what I did in the Kickstarter is I would have them vote. Like I would start the campaign with 4 unlocked artworks that were going to be printed if we reached our goal. But then as stretch goals, I asked the players to vote on which designs would want to be unlocked. So it's really fun, like, because this time my artwork for MTG Online for Sterling Grove got unlocked, and that's an art piece I never thought I'd see on a playmat myself. And it was kind of cool that it's the fans and the players that are actually choosing basically which artwork get printed, and it's really cool. Yeah.
Okay. What prompted you to start the Kickstarter?
It was, I'm a filmmaker as well, or
Okay.
at least an aspiring filmmaker.
Yep.
I've been doing these short films, and my dream is to make this really epic fantasy film called Fables. And I've been working on this project for over 6 years.
Okay.
And it came to a point when I was really nothing was working. Like as a first-time filmmaker, no one really wants to give you the money. People just kind of look at you and be like, "Why would I?" It was really difficult to find any kind of support. And I tried knocking on doors and then nothing was working. And so I decided, well, I'll try, give it a shot by taking things into my own hands, and tried reaching out to the MTG community. And I had seen like John Avon do a super successful Kickstarter, and I was like, oh well, if I could only get a fraction of what he made, like at least maybe I could start the whole process of making this feature film. And so it's really all the 100% of the profits from these campaigns are going directly to the production of the film. And that's why I'm doing these campaigns. It's really to finance the film. And that's why it's so incredible to see the Magic like community. Yes, of course, they're getting a playmat, but it's really, to me, it's much more than that. It's really, they're really actually making the film become real. It's all every person who's donated to that campaign. When the film eventually gets made, and hopefully it'll be playing in theaters and all this, then everyone who donated, it's thanks to them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And besides Googling Seb McKinnon Kickstarter, is there an easy way for people to find your Kickstarter?
I think that's the best way to be honest. Googling Seb McKinnon Kickstarter. Yeah.
There you go. Google Seb McKinnon Kickstarter. So I want to talk through. We've talked a lot about your art. I want to show some of it up and let you talk through more of it. And we'll talk through this piece that we've got in the background right now, which is Soulherder from Modern Horizons recently.
So what? I just talk about it? Or?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Well, that one was really fun for me. It was a really, really, really fun piece. I think that was Cynthia Shepard again who gave that one to me, and they were asking again for. I think it was pretty open. They were open to kind of my take on this creature that would grow in size by exiling or something like that, and I knew right away I wanted to give it this kind of otherworldly horror vibe, something that I tried to something that even maybe our minds couldn't fully comprehend if you can do that in an illustration.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, again, from this kind of chaotic process, this figure emerged, and the sun was its head, and but his cape was tearing, his body was tearing the fabric of reality, forming a cape, revealing like the space behind, So it was yeah, it was really fun. I really enjoyed that piece a lot. Yeah.
Another piece that people have been talking about a lot lately is your stasis that you did for Magic Online, and we have, I think, both the final and a sketch. So what was the concept here?
That was pretty straightforward, for the concept. The art description actually called for, a child picking a flower off, or picking flowers amidst dead or frozen soldiers locked in battle. So, I really just kind of went with what they asked for, and I came up with this. And it's for me, it's still my favorite piece I've done for Magic, and I really, really, really had a good time doing that one too. And it's funny because people were comparing it to my Fables project. Asking if it was the same character, and though it's not, but I remember while I was doing that illustration, I was also in pre-production for my latest short film I did, and it was, it featured a knight with kind of moss on his armor, and with a young fairy girl, and it's so I was in the same mindset, let's say, and so I guess that's maybe why the similarities are there. But yeah, I think, yeah, it was really, it's my favorite piece so far that I've done. That along with Angel's Favor, I think, is it? I forget the name.
Maybe I can't remember right now.
Okay.
So for this one thing I noticed is between the sketch and the final, it looks like the final's a little bit more zoomed in. What's the feedback process like once you send in a sketch and then it comes and then stuff comes back? How much back and forth is there?
It really depends on the piece. Usually with me, what happens is I take up the whole time. Like I submit the sketch, and then I give the final like right on the deadline, and then afterwards, the art director might come back and ask me to change a few things. Like with growth spiral, for example, Taylor asked me to change the colors a bit and refine a few things. In this case, in the case of stasis, there was no change really. The sketch was what I proposed. But then what happens sometimes is that when you're working on your final piece, as you're rendering, things could change slightly for me anyway, for the better. You get a different idea of a pose. You get a different idea. Like for example, in the sketch of stasis, the child is picking a flower off the shoulder of the knight, right? Reaching up and picking the flower from the shoulder. But in the final, I thought it was way more, I don't know, like poetic or impactful to have the child pick the flower off the sword that was piercing that knight, so killing him. So it changed. The position of the child, changed, and so it changed the piece, and that's why. And then I tried to make it a bit more claustrophobic, if you will, a little bit. Having knights kind of all around and making it feel like
Yeah, makes sense. Now you also mentioned growth spiral, and we've got your sketches in the final from that as well. So let's back up and talk about where you started with those sketches and how you ended up on the final.
Yeah, so that one, the art description was they were asking for something really like with a lot of spirals, a lot of they sent a reference image. I forget the specific name of the spiral, but it was kind of like, it's like a geometrical phenomenon, I think, that happens in nature sometimes, where it's like something gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller in a spiral. And I just remember feeling really like, oof, that's going to be tough. That's going to be really challenging to do. And so maybe in that first sketch, that's what it was going to be. It was going to be this kind of mage with all these kind of spirals and arches and all this kind of stuff happening around. And I just felt, while I liked that sketch a lot, I felt maybe it was a bit too busy, and it was going to, like it was, anyway, I proposed both, and I'm happy that Taylor chose the second one, which reflects more the final. And because I like the idea of, having the mage stand in water, have the water kind of become a whirlpool, and the whirlpool becoming roots, and then forming trees, and then the trees forming the city, as it arcs upwards over the head. So it felt more like it went with even the name of the card to me. You know, like growth, like to get the word growth and the meaning of growth into the card as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Another cool image you posted. So you did Chalice of the Void recently, but you also posted a progress video on your Twitter that I thought was pretty neat. So we're going to show that real quick, and you can talk over it if you like.
Cool.
Yeah. So talk about start to finish on Chalice of the Void.
Okay. Well, I can't see the video playing, but that again, I think with why I showed that video is because maybe people could see the kind of chaotic mess, that happens, and how it's really maybe how I work with textures. Hopefully, like people could see that how it's, and it's really challenging though with digital art to maintain those textures in the piece as you render, and so I feel like I'm still learning myself, how to do that through different brush techniques and blending brushes and things like this. But yeah, and I don't know what else to say about it. Yeah.
Yeah, how much of a challenge is it to create art that translates to the size of a Magic card? Because obviously these are blown up, these are gorgeous. You can see all the little details, but obviously on a Magic card it's much smaller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always. I mean, you always have to keep that in mind, obviously. And that's why I really like the opportunity to do pieces like, for example, going back, Vengeful Rebirth, where it's kind of like it's like the strokes are more like bold, if you will, or there's kind of like really dark darks on the with this around the sword, and so I like doing that because I've noticed, because when I get my artist proofs as well, I can see, you see your artwork on the card, and I've kind of taken notice of that too. Like sometimes I'll look at a card and be like, oof, like I could have maybe made this pop more a little bit, and so that's why I do like doing those kind of more bold kind of artworks every now and then, because I know that when the card's going to come out, it's going to be like, wow, it's going to look really nice. And an example of that is the Scheming Symmetry, with the lately. So I did something similar, but yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. We don't have the image for Scheming Symmetry up, but another of your core set cards, Blood for Bones, is a pretty popular card right now, especially in limited. So great. Let's look at that. This one's got chat pointed out a few things that might have inspired you, but where did this come from in your head?
Again, the same chaotic process. And the art description was, I think, again, it was pretty straightforward. So I painted, some sort of exchange was supposed to happen with skeletons and a soul, if you. And at first, I think it was Taylor, or maybe Andrew was art director on that one. I forget just now, but the first final I submitted, there was no figure on their right side. It was actually just a little light, like kind of like a comet. And so that's another example of an art director, coming in and making the piece better. They suggested, let's make it more like a being on that side. And so thanks to that suggestion, it became that piece, that we see now. Yeah. I've noticed that I often get skeleton or like.
I was just gonna ask, because I'm looking at the other list of cards that we have to talk through with you, and it's like Force of Despair with skeletons. Soulherder wasn't a skeleton, but it had a very skeletal shape to it. Death Sprout's another card that we were gonna talk through that is. It's not exactly a skeleton, but again, someone's dying in the picture. Is that? Do you think they just go to you because you're good at that? Is that a preference you have?
I mean, I love it. I'm good with that. With those suggestions for sure. I really do enjoy that. I like. I think for me, I do like finding. Something beautiful in in darkness in a way, like it's I try to get that emotion through in my pieces, and I think as an artist is the subject. I like both, I like having both together in a piece if I can, and maybe that's what they're picking up on, when the art directors are giving me these pieces. But I don't mind. I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah. Let's put Death Sprout up on the screen so people can see that. Seb, who are some of your inspirations when it comes to either just art generally or magic art?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. Art generally, like filmmakers and musicians, all this kind of stuff. But in terms of magic art, I guess we could talk about the pieces that I really liked maybe growing up? Would that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, going back to when I was a kid with my binder, I would have cards like I think the Rebecca Guay was like
Yeah.
a first, like my first when I looked at the card, I was really blown away and really had again like this kind of emotional connection to her artwork. And like for me, it was like Elvin Cash. I remember very specifically. I had that card, and I really liked it a lot. And I tried when I started playing. I tried to, I always had it in my deck because I was always happy when I pulled it up. And then so that's there's her artwork is so there's a lot of emotion in her artwork, and it's so beautiful and so and because I was also a watercolor kind of artist at first, that's how I kind of got into painting. It was through watercolors. I know she worked a lot in watercolors, so it was really, really, really nice, and I really found a lot of inspiration with her work. But then there were other ones too, and to bring up another watercolor artist who's one of my idols is John J. Muth.
Okay.
And he did Fog Elemental.
Fog Elemental, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's so simple and yet so good. And I think that's what that's what I like about the medium, the watercolor medium. Sometimes you can be very bold, and like if you look at the way the trees are painted, and how the face is just so simple, and how it's just kind of this, it's a patch of white with a face, and it works so well, and I really like that piece a lot. And then I also like the more darker artwork too. I liked cards like Feast of the Unicorn, which scared me.
The piece by Dennis Detweiler.
Yes. Yeah. And I really thought, it was fear. I felt afraid and sad for the unicorn, actually. And there's that, I'm trying to see it in my mind's eye, like I think there's one face kind of laughing with these teeth, like he's biting into it, and its teeth are dirty, and it's just, I felt so sorry for the unicorn and really disturbed me. Yeah. But I liked it. It told a story really well. What else?
Well, here we can bring up because you sent me a list. I'm not going to pretend like this is all a surprise to me. You sent "Lost Soul" by Randy Asplund.
Oh yeah. So that what I liked about that one was the environment. Like this kind of swamp environment. First of all, like the setting, the mood of it was really cool, and I kind of usually like, even in real life, like just going exploring swamps that look like that. There are a lot of in Canada, like, that's why I spent my childhood and going and exploring these kind of swampy areas. And I liked the how it was not over the top, like to have this kind of female figure just draped in a white veil, was so, again, it's an elegant kind of way to portray this lost soul character, and that is at once beguiling and very, like you'd want to go to her, kind of, but then there's also that a bit like that terror aspect on the side, that's kind of like you don't know if you could trust her or not. So again, that kind of duality between beauty and danger, is something that I liked a lot in that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one you sent was Pacifism by Robert Bliss, and this is one of my favorites too. This is around the time that I started playing, and the artwork works, the flavor text worked. It's just the whole piece works really well together.
Yeah, it was that one was like how, again, like this how bold the style was, and how, again, it was I was actually afraid of that character, and because I could imagine if he stopped, he's been pacified. Imagine what he looks like when he's not. Like it'd be, I imagine this kind of really like berserker, and And then to have like the little deer as well, like on the side, and how it's like I don't know, it's just the whole piece comes together really really nicely. And if when I would play it, like because as a kid I was like afraid of it, I was afraid of that character, but then to have him pacified, I don't know, it just really worked well when you played that spell,
Yeah.
as during a game. The emotion was very strong.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things I liked about this piece too is that we've reprinted Pacifism a bunch of times with a ton of different artists taking different passes at it, but the kind of sense of the light sense of humor has carried through, and not all of the pieces, but this piece sort of originated what Pacifism feels like, where it's slightly silly, but you definitely don't want that character to wake up.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And Jesper Ejden did a really great one recently, no? For Passivism. He did like that giant
Yeah, I think so.
meeting. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was really well done too. Yeah.
We don't have that one, unfortunately. But the next one you sent in was from the very earliest set, and a lot of people love this piece of art, The Terror by Ron Spencer.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That, again, for like that kind of bold, look at like the negative space that was used, and having him really up in the corner. It works so well in the eye. Again, I think it's just a piece that really scared me as a kid when I saw it. I think like with this list, it's all the pieces that I looked at and felt a really strong emotional reaction to. And in a way, like like for my piece, Bedevil, I tried to do a bit the same thing in a way, like with the character hiding her face in the corner. I just liked like as I started studying illustration too, and I'd go back to my old deck and look at the cards. I'd be like, wow, that was actually really brilliant what he did. Having the character up in the corner like that, with all this darkness around. So yeah, really worked well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Bedevil, because that's been a card that a lot of people in chat have mentioned as being among their favorite pieces of art. So next, so this one, talking about your emotional response, I imagine your emotional response to this one was the exact opposite of Feast of the Unicorn. So Regal Unicorn by Zena Saunders.
Yeah.
A little bit happier piece here.
Happier piece.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a beautiful painting on its own, just like that. Again, very simple, nothing too over the top. It's just a unicorn, but drawn really well and painted really well. But for that one, it's the flavor text. That's why I like that artwork so much. It's just because it's my favorite flavor text on any card, and I don't know why. It's a bit.
Do you remember? Do you remember the flavor text? I don't know what it is.
Oh, it's something like unicorns don't care if you believe in them as much as you care if they believe in you. Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know why I always like that flavor text, and it kind of stuck with me.
That makes sense. I was going to say, this piece of the ones you said were your inspirations. The other ones are all they're moody, I would say, and this one is far lighter. Right, yeah.
But that's why I think I do find my inspiration is through the mood of things. It's if you can go on these amazing inner journeys if you follow that thread, like that mood, and yeah. So.
Okay, makes sense. Last one is actually it's funny because I remember this piece of artwork very vividly as well. Even though the card it's on is not a terribly impressive card, but Quinton Hoover's Tundra Wolves.
Yeah.
That art, it stands out to you.
It stands out. I like the use of the black lines, but also again, it's as a kid there's a park near my family's cottage where you can go and drive through it and see these Canadian animals. And as a kid, we do that a lot. And there'd be the wolf section. And I guess that card just reminded me a lot of that, and became like a kind of, there was a childhood connection to that art piece. But I also like, again, like if you imagine you discovering that scene, and stumbling upon, the carcass of a caribou, something like that, which is something I've also like experienced. Like I've like walked in the forest and found the carcass of a deer half eaten, and I knew the night before wolves had come and eaten it. So
welcome to Canada.
Yeah. So and then also what I like about that piece is just that one wolf looking at you, looking at the viewer.
Yeah.
That's I like that.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
So we've got about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we get to some questions. So chat, if you've got more questions, put them in chat. I've been writing them down. And there's another one. So let's start with, this one's pretty simple and straightforward. Do you have a favorite color or colors in Magic to create art for?
I think black and white.
Okay.
Would be my favorite, yeah.
Okay. Is there any, now the next question, is there any lore in Magic that you particularly enjoy?
Yes, well, like the Lorwyn, setting and the stories in there were very inspiring to me because again, like I read up a lot on Celtic folklore and Scottish and Irish legends, and I always liked that. And like Una is my favorite legendary creature. So that lore, the whole lore behind Lorwyn, is something I really like a lot.
Okay.
And then, but maybe more closer to me, like the stories that were coming out around Aminatu.
Mm-hmm.
I was really happy, like when she ended up, being, lore-wise, someone very, very powerful. I didn't know she'd be that powerful when I was doing the piece. So if we could explore more of her story, I'd love to. There's a lot of mystery to me around her character, and I'd love to know more about her, and yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Related to that, so Aminatu is a planeswalker. Are there any other planeswalkers that already exist that you'd like to take a crack at drawing?
That already exist.
Mm-hmm.
Ashiok is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool. But then, that'd be a hard act to follow. Like I think what Carla Ortiz did the first one, I think, and then Cynthia Shepard did another amazing piece. And I was like, oof, those paintings are so good. But yeah, maybe him. Yeah, probably that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
One person in chat asked if you had seen the Ristic Studies video on your work.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
What'd you think of it?
Incredible. And I really want to do a shout out to Sam because I think thanks to him, a lot of people know more about my work.
Mm-hmm.
It's thanks to his video that people just maybe started paying attention more to what I was doing, and this goes for all the other artists that he's done videos for. He's so good. His videos are so well done.
Mm-hmm.
And when he told me he was going to do one on me, I was just over the moon. I was just really I was really happy. And he's just a really nice guy too. And he's really, his insight on artwork in general and all that, it's really quite fascinating and cool to see. Yeah. Is amazing. So everyone should go check out his YouTube videos for sure. They're really, really, really well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's Ristic Studies on YouTube. Next up, do you have any, when you start a piece, do you ever set out with a particular goal or a challenge for yourself in mind?
Sometimes. Again, I at the beginning, I always try to keep a blank mind, but I knew if I was to take an example, well, Angel's favorite, I forget the name. I made a mistake on Twitter. I think I called it Angelic Blessing, but it's not that. I don't know why I keep forgetting the Angel's Favor, I think it was, where there's like that was just recently for Modern Horizons. Mm-hmm. The angel coming down and giving this knight a kiss on his head. I knew from the get-go for that piece, I really want to try something maybe not different, but like I really want to, I'm a huge fan of the pre-Raphaelites, so John Waterhouse, all his work is so inspiring to me. And I really, from the get-go, when I got the art description, I was like, finally a card that I can try to, channel that pre-Raphaelites, through this one. So in that case, yes, that was my goal for that piece. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, speaking of inspirations, we've had a couple different questions about are you a fan of this person? So I'm gonna list off some names and see if you're a fan of this person.
Okay.
I don't know if they're a legend or not. I honestly don't know the name, so I could be walking into a trap here. Swedish legend John Bauer.
Yeah, of course. Yes, for sure. That's even in the Ristic Studies video. I sent Sam the artists that have inspired me, and that was one of them for sure. I actually have one of the old Swedish fairy tale book that he illustrated.
Okay.
And yeah, really, 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 really love his work a lot. I know John Bauer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna butcher these names. What about Hieronymus Bosch?
Of course.
Okay.
Studied him in school.
All right. Peter Bruegel.
Oh wow, that rings a bell. Can I might know him from the artwork. Can I just look it up, maybe?
Yeah, look it up. And while you're looking it up here, these are easy ones. What about Da Vinci or Rembrandt?
Of course, yes. I didn't know about Bruegel.
Okay.
No. But I can see it's very similar to what Bosch was doing.
Okay. Makes sense.
Wow. Thank
okay.
you for suggesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, okay, I think that's all the inspirations for now. We did have somebody asking a non-magic question about, you mentioned that you worked on Rainbow Six. Were there any characters you specifically had a hand in developing?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
I was an environmental artist.
Gotcha.
So I was painting environments for that game. Yeah.
Makes sense. Do you listen to anything while you're working?
No, I don't. And the reason is because if I do, my painting doesn't advance because my mind goes elsewhere with the music. I get a lot of ideas by listening to music and actually making my own music. And that's why I've tried before, and I just sometimes it's, again, I really paint from, it's a feeling. And sometimes if you're listening to another piece of music and it doesn't jam with the feeling that you're supposed to be conveying in your piece, there's a disconnect there. So it kind of takes me out of it. So I usually work in silence. I realized I do my best work when I work in silence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever go to Magic Fests?
In the past, I was invited to a few, and I haven't been invited I'm not sure how that works usually. I don't know if you're supposed to, as an artist, like put in tell them, like reach out to them that you are interested. But I think the last one I did was years ago, and I was invited to Prague, and that was amazing to be part of the experience. So that would, I haven't been to one in a long time.
Okay. If you're interested, I know the people, so I'll shoot an email, do an introduction.
Okay.
How much time do you normally spend on a piece?
Well, that really depends. It really, really depends. Depends on the style as well you're going for. Like if you look at a piece like Soulherder versus Scheming Symmetry, they're not the same, and one requires more rendering time than the other. But then again, sometimes to come up with the initial idea takes more time than the rendering. Like sometimes I'll open my you open Photoshop, blank canvas, and you're there trying things out and nothing works for the day. That happens a a lot.
Yeah.
So then you have to go kind of, okay, well, tomorrow's a new day, and you try to come up with a new thing. But in general, it's really hard to tell. Sometimes it's like you could do something in 2 days, and then sometimes a week, and then sometimes I like to take a break. Like I'll work for 5 days on a piece, and then not look at it for a good week, and then keep the deadline in mind, and then go back and then touch it up on the very last day, and then maybe you see you see it with fresher eyes.
Yeah.
So it's hard to gauge.
Okay. What do you paint when you're just painting for yourself and not working on a project?
Usually I'm on my Fables project. Yeah. So I mean, like to give an idea, like I'm in pre-production for it, right now, thanks to the Kickstarter campaigns and everyone who's donated. But the team right now is just me, and when you do a film, you have to storyboard your film. So I'm doing that. So whenever I have free time, I have to go in and I'm drawing all the storyboards of the film and thinking of my shots, and which is really it takes up so much energy, to do. Yeah. So sometimes it's hard to kind of like go from a magic commission right away to a storyboard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I need to take some breaks.
Yeah. What magic card that you worked on had the most challenging concept for you?
Oh man. Oh wow. I think I'm trying to think. I think they're more or less all the same. Like it's funny because when you start a new piece, well, at least when I start a new piece, there's always this fear, like this anxiety before, because you don't know if you're going to come up with a cool idea, and it's always there, and it's a very specific feeling, and it's always like you have to kind of ignore it or just fight it. You take it head on, and then you work through it, and then eventually there's like a barrier that you break, or then there's an idea that just arrives, and then there's this wave of like, whew, okay, I still got it. I can still do this,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah, but they all have their own separate challenges. Like there's not one piece, I think, that's more difficult than the other. Maybe again, when it comes more to rendering, the more something is rendered and has to be precise, and you have to think of the lighting, and you have to think of how the shapes form and all this kind of stuff, that for sure is way more challenging than the pieces where I'm allowed to, for example, eventual Rebirth, just like work with bolder, textures and symbols and line work. That those are relatively easier pieces to do than more rendered. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, last 3 questions. That's all we got time for. We'll get through it. Would you ever do art for a graphic novel or comic?
Yes, absolutely. And I've actually started already for my Fables project. That project it's a multimedia. I'm world building. Like I do all the music for it under the name Clan. I do the graphic novel. I'm working on it. You can actually find on the Fables website like a sneak peek of what it looks like. And I'm doing the film, and I really wanted to be this kind of artistic fantasy project that encompasses music and paintings and graphic novels and all this kind of stuff. So it's really exciting. So yes, I am working on a graphic novel.
Okay, very cool. Well, that answers in part the second to last question, at least. What are you working on now?
That project. Outside of that, yeah. When I'm not doing magic commissions.
Yep.
Or every now and then I get a directing job. I like doing commercials or things like this. But I'm working on Fables whenever I have spare time, and it's becoming more and more real thanks to these Kickstarter campaigns. And I just can't wait to be able to say, we're going and we're shooting. There's still a lot of work that has to be done before then.
Yep.
Trying to balance everything else in your life. But yeah, so I'm working on Kin Fables.
Very cool. All right, last question. If you could tell an aspiring magic artist something, what would it be?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think one is just draw as much as you can. Like actually make an effort to carry a sketchbook and record the world around you. At all times, like when you're on the bus or when you're waiting for something, or you're waiting for your food at the restaurant. Like I always have a sketchbook on me, and it helps train your eye, because when you're drawing in a sketchbook things that you're observing, you start paying attention to the world a lot more. And not only when it comes to drawing, you pay attention to the way the light hits a leaf, or you pay attention to the shape of a vase, and how things work. So that's really important. And then the second piece of advice I would give would be to draw the things that you love, and that you're really, really, really passionate about, because that comes through in a piece. And especially if they want to be a magic artist, then you have to like drawing fantasy things.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah. I think an art director, when if they're looking at portfolios, and that passion is palpable. You could actually pick it out. You could see it in like a spread of illustrations. So you can kind of tell, like the one where it's like there's raw, pure passion on it.
Yeah.
So to all artists, all artists I think are very passionate to begin with, but you should just really channel that and really like kind of harness it. Really go to the the most you can, like to the furthest extent of your passion on your painting. Yeah.
Great advice. Well, that is all the time we have. We're actually over by a couple minutes. But Seb, thank you so much for joining us, for answering so many questions from the fans. Again, if you want to check out Seb McKinnon's Kickstarter, the best way to do it is to Google Seb McKinnon Kickstarter. And you have all kinds of playmats from your magic art. And then also reminder that SDCC is this weekend, and we are showing off a bunch of art from Throne of Eldraine at Mark Rosewater's panel, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. We will be live tweeting that panel, and yes, Seb McKinnon does have some art that will be shown off during that panel. So make sure, make sure you follow at Wizards_Magic, and we'll be showing off all of that art, including, if I'm remembering correctly, it's at least one piece from Seb, might be two. So look forward to that this Saturday. Next week on Weekly MTG, what are we doing? We're doing something. Oh, we have an announcement about Magic Story, actually. We're sticking in the art side of things. So we're going to talk about Magic Fiction and a little bit of new information about that you might learn a little bit about this weekend as well. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Seb, for joining us. And we will see you all next week.